You'll be visiting your relatives in a foreign land.
You'll be visiting your relatives in a foreign land. Before her death, Vivian Vance finally spoke honestly about what life was really like behind the laughter of "I Love Lucy." To the world, she was Ethel Mertz, the best friend and constant sidekick. Off camera, her experience was far more complicated. For years, she followed unspoken rules, endured quiet pressure, and carried feelings she rarely shared. What she later revealed wasn't meant to shock, but it changed how people understood the show and the relationships behind it. Join us as we uncover what Vivian Vance revealed, why she stayed silent for so long, and how her truth reshapes "I Love Lucy," the real Vivian Vance. Vivian Vance did not begin her life surrounded by applause. Born Vivian Robera Jones in 1909 in Cherry, Kansas, she grew up in a strict religious household where performing was discouraged. Acting, singing, and dancing were seen as improper for a young woman, and Vivian quickly learned that showing her talents could bring disapproval instead of praise. This early suppression left lasting scars. She often hid her abilities, questioning her instincts and self-worth, and the habit of holding back followed her well into adulthood. Even as she found success later, she felt she had to earn approval rather than simply deserve it. Determined to escape these limits, Vivian moved to New York City and reinvented herself, changing her name to Vivian Vance. There she found freedom, opportunity, and a community that valued talent. She studied acting seriously and worked tirelessly, driven by both ambition and the need to prove her dreams were valid. Her hard work paid off. By the 1930s and 1940s, Vivian was a respected Broadway performer known for her strong singing voice, comedic timing, emotional depth, and sharp wit. Directors and fellow actors admired her discipline and presence, and she could bring both confidence and nuance to every role. Offstage, Vivian was nothing like the frumpy, loud Ethel Mertz. She was attractive, stylish, and deeply emotional. At the same time, she struggled with depression and insecurity, rooted in childhood and reinforced by years of proving herself. Success did not erase these feelings. It often intensified them. She wanted to be recognized for who she truly was, not just the characters she played. And just as her talent was reaching its peak, one television role would come along that would change the course of her life forever. Comedy comes at a cost. When "I Love Lucy" was first coming together, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz knew exactly what they wanted for the role of Ethel Mertz. Lucy needed a sidekick, someone to stand beside her in schemes, jokes, and everyday chaos. But the role came with strict expectations. Ethel was meant to feel older, heavier, and more ordinary than Lucy. She was supposed to support the comedy, not compete for attention. The network and producers believed the audience needed a clear contrast between Lucy, the lively star, and her best friend next door. That belief is why Vivian Vance was not an obvious choice. When she auditioned, studio executives immediately pushed back. In their eyes, she was simply too pretty for the role. She carried herself with confidence, had a refined look, and brought a strong stage presence that worried the people in charge. They feared she would distract from Lucy or draw attention away from the show's central character. To them, casting Vivian felt risky, even wrong. Lucille Ball disagreed. From the moment she saw Vivian perform, Lucy recognized something special. Vivian had sharp instincts, emotional awareness, and perfect timing. She listened closely, reacted naturally, and elevated every scene she touched. Lucy understood that comedy worked best when performers trusted each other, and she felt that Vivian would be a partner, not a rival. Despite studio objections, Lucy insisted on hiring her. It was a bold move, especially at a time when networks held enormous power. Lucy used her influence to push the decision through, setting the stage for one of television's most famous partnerships, but that decision came with an unspoken contract. From the very beginning, it was understood that Ethel could never overshadow Lucy. Vivian knew this, even if it was never written down. She was expected to stay in the background, support the jokes, and never pull focus. For a woman who had once been a Broadway lead, this was a difficult adjustment. Vivian felt torn. On one hand, she was grateful for the opportunity. Television offered stability, exposure, and a steady income. On the other hand, she felt a quiet sense of dread. She worried about being reduced to a secondary role, about losing the depth and range she had worked so hard to build. The shift from respected stage performer to sitcom sidekick required emotional compromise. Still, she accepted the role knowing it would change her life, even if she didn't yet know how much it would cost her. And once filming began, the real rules of her place on the show became impossible to ignore. Beauty banned on set. Playing Ethel Mertz came with rules that went far beyond lines or comic timing. From the start of I Love Lucy, there was an unspoken agreement. Ethel was never allowed to be pretty. This expectation was enforced through wardrobe, makeup, and production choices. Vivian Vance quickly realized that her natural appearance was seen as a problem that needed controlling. The wardrobe department shaped this image in very specific ways. Vivian was dressed in matronly house dresses, loose sweaters, and shapeless skirts that hid her figure. Padding was sometimes added to make her appear heavier. Undergarments flattened her shape, and every costume choice worked to make her look older, duller, and less glamorous than Lucy Evan when the script didn't require it. Makeup followed the same pattern. Artists were told to soften her features instead of highlighting them. Hair was kept simple, practical, and completely without flair. Even posture and movement were guided to appear awkward or slouched. Every detail reinforced that Ethel was meant to stay in the background. Weight became another point off control. Vivian was discouraged from losing pounds, and producers sometimes hinted that staying heavier maintained the contrast with Lucy. This pressure affected her deeply. Already sensitive about her body, Vivian found her self-worth slowly tied to the idea that she could only be funny if she looked a certain way. The jokes about Ethel's appearance, meant for laughs, often landed painfully close to home. The emotional toll was real. Vivian often cried in her dressing room, frustrated and humiliated, but she rarely complained publicly, knowing actresses were easily labeled difficult. She returned to the set with professionalism, even as her confidence eroded. Off-camera, the contrast surprised fans. Many were stunned by her beauty and style, often saying, "You don't look like Ethel at all." Those comments were a reminder of how completely the role erased her true self. Over time, this disconnect caused a profound sense of identity loss. Vivian Vance was no longer seen as a talented actress or former Broadway star. She had become Ethel, the frumpy neighbor, and that label followed her everywhere. With each laugh from the audience, the emotional cost quietly grew heavier. Silent insults exchanged. On screen, Ethel and Fred Mertz looked like a perfectly matched comic pair. They bickered, teased, and annoyed each other in ways that felt natural and funny. Off-screen, however, the relationship between Vivian Vance. He often arrived underprepared and relied on instinct rather than careful planning. Vivian, by contrast, was theater-trained, disciplined, and methodical. She believed in rehearsal, precision, and emotional truth. She took her work seriously and expected others to do the same. This difference caused constant friction. When Frawley showed up late or disengaged, Vivian saw it as disrespectful. She was sensitive and deeply invested in her craft, and his casual attitude frustrated her. On set, they spoke only when necessary and avoided each other when the cameras stopped rolling. Crew members were aware of the tension, but as long as filming stayed on schedule, Lucy and Desi chose not to intervene. Over time, the conflict turned into a quiet Cold War. Vivian and Frawley refused to socialize together, avoided events, and kept their distance off camera. Eventually, their contracts specified that they would not be required to tour or make joint appearances. Insults were exchanged quietly. Frawley mocked Vivian when he could, and she responded by complaining to producers and limiting interaction to the bare minimum. Despite all this, their on-screen chemistry worked remarkably well. The tension sharpened their performances. The bickering felt real because it was real. Their timing was precise, their reactions sharp, and their scenes full of energy. Audiences believed Fred and Ethel because the emotions came from a genuine place. They never became friends, but a reluctant respect formed. Frawley acknowledged Vivian's talent, and Vivian recognized his comic instincts. Together. Despite the conflict, they created one of television's most memorable couples. And behind that success, more unseen tensions were still quietly building. Walking a tightrope daily to the public, Lucy and Ethel looked like inseparable friends, perfectly matched in mischief and loyalty. Behind the scenes, the relationship between Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance was far more complex. It was built on respect and admiration, but also shaped by rivalry, insecurity, and a clear imbalance of power. From the beginning, the ground was uneven. Lucille Ball was already a major star when I Love Lucy began. She was not only the lead actress, but also an executive producer with creative control. She influenced scripts, casting, and major decisions. Vivian Vance arrived with strong Broadway experience, but little power in television. She depended on the show for stability and exposure. Lucy was the boss, and Vivian felt that reality from day one. Their early relationship was polite, but distant. Vivian admired Lucy's sharp instincts and discipline. Lucy respected Vivian's talent and timing. Still, closeness was slow to form. Lucy was focused and guarded, while Vivian was emotional and eager to connect. The mix of power difference and personality made true ease difficult. Even as their on-screen chemistry grew, beauty became an unspoken tension. Off-screen, Vivian was stylish and attractive, while Ethel was carefully made to look plain. Rumors suggested Lucy felt uneasy about this contrast. Whether from insecurity or studio pressure, Vivian felt she needed to dim herself. She avoided drawing attention to her looks, voice, or intelligence. Staying safe meant staying in her place. Friendship was also complicated by hierarchy. Lucy was not just a co-star, she controlled Vivian's professional world. Vivian chose her words carefully. Complaints about costumes or jokes felt risky. Speaking honestly could threaten her position, so she often stayed silent and absorbed frustration. This created emotional whiplash. Some days Lucy was warm, supportive, and affectionate. Other days she could be sharp or critical, sometimes in front of others. Vivian once described the experience as walking a tightrope in heels, never sure when she might lose balance. Because of this, she struggled to fully confide in Lucy, even when she needed support. Over time, shared pain brought them closer. Both women faced troubled marriages and deep personal stress. In private moments, they shared fears, exhaustion, and quiet understanding. Their bond was not easy or simple. It was built through survival, not comfort. They were colleagues, rivals, friends, and emotional support all at once. Even in moments of closeness, tension never fully disappeared. Loyalty often required silence, and affection came with limits. And just when their bond felt strongest, new challenges would test how much Vivian was willing to endure for loyalty, stuck in Ethel's shadow. For Vivian Vance, success on I Love Lucy came with a quiet label that followed her everywhere. No matter how skilled she was always seen as second place. Before television, she had been a respected Broadway performer, trusted with demanding roles that required strong singing, emotional range, and intelligence. On stage, she was often the focus. On television, she became the eternal number two, the sidekick whose job was to support the star and never step in front of her. This shift was difficult to accept. Vivian understood the value of the role she had been given, but she also felt the limits of it. Ethel Mertz was beloved, but she was not allowed to grow beyond a certain point. Vivian delivered every joke with care and precision, but inside resentment slowly built. She rarely showed it. Instead, she masked those feelings with professionalism. She showed up prepared, hit her marks, and gave the audience exactly what they came for. That discipline became her shield. She once referred to Ethel as the role of a lifetime, and she meant it. The show gave her fame, security, and a place in television history. But it also trapped her. Casting directors could no longer see past the character. Offers that came her way often felt like repeats of the same idea. Funny neighbor, supportive friend, older woman. The range she once had on Broadway was narrowed to a single image. Despite this frustration, Vivian did not walk away. Many people have wondered why she stayed when the role hurt her self-esteem. The answer was complex. Television offered stability that stage work often could not. The industry was unpredictable, especially for women over 40. Leaving a successful show would have meant starting over with no guarantees. Vivian was also deeply committed to her craft. She believed in doing the job well, even when the job asked for personal sacrifice. Her pride was tied to her work, not her position. She cared more about delivering a strong performance than about ego. Even when the jokes felt humiliating, she focused on timing, expression, and truth. She found ways to bring warmth and intelligence to Ethel, even within strict limits. That effort turned what could have been a flat character into a fully realized person. Still, the resentment never fully disappeared. It lived quietly beneath the surface, shaping how Vivian viewed her place in the industry. She accepted being second, but she never stopped knowing she was capable of more. As the years passed, this awareness became both a source of strength and sorrow. It sharpened her performances, but it also deepened her longing for recognition beyond the shadow of another star. And as the show continued, that quiet tension would follow her into the next phase of her career, breaking Ethel's chains. When I Love Lucy ended in 1957, Vivian Vance believed a new chapter was finally beginning. After 6 years as one of the most recognizable faces on television, she expected new opportunities to follow. Instead, she quickly learned that Hollywood had already made up its mind. To the industry, she was no longer a woman who. That question stayed with her in the years that followed, guiding her choices, reshaping her priorities, and pushing her toward a quieter life where identity mattered more than applause, private pain, public smile. Behind Vivian Vance's bright smile and sharp comedic timing was a long history of emotional struggle. Much of it tied to her search for love and stability. Throughout her life, she was married several times, and many of those relationships followed a painful pattern. At first, there was excitement and hope. Over time, that hope often gave way to neglect, insecurity, and disappointment. Vivian wanted a deep emotional connection, but she often chose partners who could not meet her needs. Some of her husbands felt threatened by her intelligence and success. Vivian was thoughtful, articulate, and professionally accomplished, qualities that were not always welcomed by men in that era. Instead of being supportive, some partners became distant or dismissive. Others resented the attention she received from fans and colleagues. This left Vivian feeling unseen and undervalued in her personal life. Even as she was celebrated in public, these repeated experiences took a toll on her mental health. Vivian struggled with depression long before discussions about mental well-being were common or accepted. In mid-century Hollywood, emotional struggles were often ignored or hidden. Seeking help carries stigma, especially for women. Admitting to anxiety or sadness could damage a career. Despite this, Vivian did seek therapy at different points in her life. She understood that something inside her needed care, even if the world around her was not ready to offer understanding. Unfortunately, vulnerability was often misunderstood. When Vivian expressed frustration or emotional pain, she was sometimes labeled as difficult or moody. Her sensitivity, which made her a powerful performer, was seen as a flaw off camera. This label followed her quietly, making it harder for her to be open about what she was experiencing. Rather than being seen as someone in need of support, she was viewed as someone who caused problems. Vivian also carried a deep habit of self-blame. She often questioned whether she was asking for too much or expecting too much from others. She wondered if her intensity pushed people away. This inner conflict made her relationships even more complicated. Her need for love was strong, but each disappointment reinforced her fears of not being enough. The contrast between her public and private life was stark. Millions of people laughed at her performances every week. They saw confidence, warmth, and joy. Behind closed doors, Vivian often felt lonely and unsure. The applause faded quickly once the cameras stopped rolling. What remained was the quiet struggle to feel valued for who she truly was, not just for what she could give to others. As she grew older, that loneliness deepened. Fame could not protect her from self-doubt or emotional fatigue. The constant need to be strong, pleasant, and grateful became exhausting. She longed for rest, understanding, and a sense of peace that success never fully brought. and as the years passed, this emotional weight would follow her into an even more private and difficult chapter of her life. Courage Behind Curtains. In the 1970s, Vivian Vance faced one of the hardest truths of her life. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, a reality she chose to keep largely private. At the time, cancer was rarely discussed openly, especially by public figures. Vivian did not want sympathy, headlines, or to be defined by illness. She handled the diagnosis quietly, sharing the information only with a small circle of trusted people. As the disease progressed and later spread to her bones, the physical pain increased, but her desire for privacy never wavered. Despite her condition, Vivian continued to work when she could. She appeared in commercials, did voice work, and accepted small projects that allowed her to stay connected to her craft. On the outside, she looked composed and capable. Behind the scenes, she was often exhausted and in pain. She learned to manage treatments, discomfort, and fear without letting it show. This choice was not about denial.